Hello, Chris.
Hello, Sally.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. And how are you?
Oh, good, thank you. Yes, quite amazing how easy it is to connect.
Well, first of all, thank you for your time.
Well, you're
Um,
very welcome.
I guess we can just go through the questions in order if that suits you.
Yeah, that would
Um,
be fine.
I mean, it's such a musical family. Were your
Oh,
parents music?
absolutely. My paternal grandmother was a brilliant pianist,
Ah,
and she was actually through her, my first memory of knowing that I really loved music was when I think I was about 5 years old. Our parents used to take us three children to visit down in Margate. Had a little house called the Warren by the sea.
right.
And I remember my grandmother used to play these beautiful pieces of music. My favorite one was called Rustle of Spring. It was this beautiful, floaty, ripply piece of
Hmm.
music. From then on, I really thought music is the most wonderful thing. Our father also had a wonderful singing voice. It was untrained. He had a very raw, untrained baritone voice,
Yeah.
but he used to launch into anything he can get his hands on, like classical arias.
Hmm.
His favorite piece of aria was None But the Lonely Heart, something like that by
Hmm.
Tchaikovsky.
Ah,
Yeah, he loved music. My mother was tone deaf, but she did love music, and she would, whenever she could, we'd hear her put Madame Butterfly or
ah,
any kind of opera on the record player.
yeah.
So we grew up with a lot of music in the background.
When did you start? Because you play quite a lot of different instruments.
Yes, well, I was actually coerced into having piano lessons at St.
Hmm.
Joseph's Convent, Reading, where I spent all my school years from, nursery school right up until A levels. And
Yes.
most of the teachers were nuns. So I actually hated music lessons.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but because they were very strict and sort of not very
Yes.
creative. But I did stick it out till grade eight
Hmm.
and came to, quite love playing the piano. And of course, if you play piano, that opens up a lot of
Yes.
keyboard instruments, so that led later on in my life to tuned percussion,
Yeah.
vibraphone, marimba, all of that sort of thing. Regarding the three of us as children, neither Terry nor I really ever envisaged a career in music or ever
Right.
thought about taking it up seriously.
Mm.
But that was in stark contrast to Mike, who, of
Yeah.
course, I mean, he was just born to play music and did so from early childhood. So the three of us are quite different in that.
So, how did you really make that transition?
Oh, well, yeah, that's quite a long story,
Uh,
actually. Well, it leads into kind of later in my life. I went to St. Joseph's Convent School, Reading, and met Marianne Faithful. We were both
mm,
12 years old, and we were in the same class, and we kind of gravitated together because we both really passionately loved literature and poetry
ah,
and all of that. We used to, read the Romantic poets and
mm,
Shelley and Keats and all of those over the whole of my kind of senior school years. She and I used to go down to the River Thames, which was our local river,
yeah.
with the boys from the local boys' schools, and we used to sing folk songs.
Ah,
Yeah, all those songs like House of the Rising Sun,
yes.
Careless Love,
Yeah.
all of them. And by that time, I'd learnt to play the guitar a little bit.
Mm,
Never got that great on guitar, but I used to accompany myself, or still do. So folk singing was a hobby. But then when I went to university, Bristol University,
mm,
the hobby continued. I used to sing down at the Troubadour Folk Club in Bristol.
right.
I don't know if it's still there, but it was a hive of activity in the 60s when I was a
Mm,
student. And you had these wonderful guest artists like Bert Jansch, John
Oh,
Rennie.
really?
Yeah,
Wow.
it was really quite a wonderful place. But particularly Bert Jansch was a favourite of
Mm,
mine and also of Mike's. You know, used to copy all those and learn all Bert Jansch's guitar pieces, you know, which are
yeah.
pretty complex.
Yes.
And Bert Jansch had this particular guitar piece called Angie, and that
Mm.
is actually was the inspiration for the name for the Sally Angie.
Ah, right. I was wondering.
Yeah, so things, all these connections. But you were asking, how did I make the transition to
Mm.
from just a hobby to, right, this is my life. I had quite a powerful, what I can only call a spiritual experience. I went for a walk one afternoon, late afternoon, when the sun was setting, down by the sea near Bristol on the west coast. I think it was
Mm.
near Portishead. Just had this, it just came out of the blue. I mean, I was never a spiritual seeker at all. I was
Mm.
a lapsed Catholic, very
Yes.
lapsed. You know, I wasn't into any kind of religion, but I've always had a strong spiritual sense, you
Mm.
know, with nature and just existence generally. And this kind of, I don't know, it just really exploded into being on that afternoon. It was February
Wow.
1968. I remember it vividly.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was just coming up to doing my finals at university, and I was planning to go on to do some sort of academic career, you know, because
Mm.
I love literature and poetry. So, but then when I got back to my flat in Victoria Square, Clifton in Bristol, picked up my guitar, and these songs just poured out. I mean, they just seemed to come from nowhere, and these little pieces that I was sort of playing around with, trying to write songs to no avail, you know, for
Mm.
years. I just couldn't write anything, just poured out.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, it was incredible. And ever since then, I've been in a kind of reverse engineering of studying all kinds of different spiritual
Yes.
paths to understand that experience. It was like just being absorbed into this
Mm.
infinite golden light. I mean, there was
Mm.
nothing but this infinite golden light. And, you know,
Wow.
it was just overwhelming.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it did. It changed my life. But the first song I actually wrote was called Lady Mary. And that was the first song I played to Mike when we started recording Children of the Sun.
Mm.
So it was all born out of that spiritual experience. It changed my
Wow.
life totally, totally.
And that was the same year that Sally Angie released Children of the Sun.
Yes, I mean, I was in such a state of clear-headed state of mind that I just felt that there was nothing I couldn't do. I literally packed up all my stuff at university and my flat and everything. And I told my friends, I'm going to London, I'm going to get the record deal. And
Wow.
hitched a lift into London.
Wow.
It's a bit of a long story, of course,
Mm.
but by, I think it was July, I got a record deal with Transatlantic. And that was when I introduced them to Mike because he was, you know, such a wonderful guitar player.
Yes.
And that's how the duo was born. Some of the songs we wrote together, some of them were my songs, some of them were Mike's guitar pieces. We did all the preparation very quickly, actually, in our family home in Harold Wood. And then we recorded it over just 2 days. We just had two
Wow.
days in the studio. I know it's very quick. Sound Techniques in Chelsea.
Mm.
When I look back, I think, you know, that was much too soon to make an album. But, you know, I was in such an incredible state of mind that it just lasted. Well, it's lasted most of my life coming and going. But
It's such an amazing transition, a very brave thing to do, to give that up and go to London. And
yeah, looking back, I mean, I could never, ever do such a thing now. I mean, yeah, it just gave me such strength at that time and such a clear vision of what I wanted to do. It was quite miraculous. Yeah.
I just want to touch on this nugget that I came across about Mick Jagger's involvement somewhere along the line.
Oh, yes, that was amazing as well. That actually came out of my friendship with Marianne Faithfull.
Ah, of course.
Because we were best friends, really, up until the time when she was 17. And of course, you know, it's down in rock history what happened to her when she was 17, skyrocketed to fame.
Yeah.
I went to visit Marianne soon after this experience that I had when I started to write my own songs. I went to visit her. She was living in Chester Square with Mick at that time. This was about in the spring of 1968. It was a lovely sunny afternoon, and Mick was just off to the studio with Keith Richards. They were doing some recording, and he overheard one of my songs. I think this is how it happened. I've got a very clear memory of it, but he said, "Oh, that's a nice song. You can pop into the studio, I'll put it down for you, just you and the guitar." So that's how I got a really good demo of a couple of the songs, which eventually went on to Children of the Sun.
Were those demos what enabled you to get the recording contract?
Yes, at least the two songs that I had. I think it was the title track, Children of the Sun. I got the recording contract like the same afternoon. I mean, you know, and I think Transatlantic were looking for something unusual. There it was. So it was quite a wonderful thing. I remember when we got the contract, because Mike was still only 15, it had to be signed by our parents. He didn't have a clue what they were signing.
Yeah.
I think I still got it with Mum and Dad's signature on it. We got a whopping advance of £25 each.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, very excited at that time. That was a lot of money.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how long did Sally Angie last for?
Only about a year, actually. Before, you know, Mike went his own way, and then, you know, because I'd done everything so quickly.
Yes.
I really didn't quite know what to do after that. Except I knew I was going to carry on writing songs, and, you know, music was going to be my life. I'd only been writing songs for about, you know, 4 months before releasing the first album. So I really spent the next few years just developing my own style, developing my songwriting. So entered a sort of dark period in a way.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I was sort of working in bars and occasional folk clubs, just wondering what on earth to do, and exploring spiritual paths as well. So it was about 5 years before I actually got the record deal to make my first solo album.
And that was Waterbearer.
Yeah.
This time around, was it quite a different process for you?
Yes, it was. It was totally different because I'd had 5 years of writing and experimenting with my own music, just by myself. I didn't work with anybody at all. So it was a wonderful kind of incubation time for the album Waterbearer, which I've never been able to have since then, unfortunately, because after Waterbearer, you know, is very much involved in the record industry.
Yes.
It's not always, you know, for somebody like me is the most supportive environment. But anyway, I had a lot of song ideas. And the way that Waterbearer came about was, I was actually visiting Mike at the time when he was living at Thrupp and Slad, working on his music. He was taking a break and he actually offered me the use of his beautiful studio. That was wonderful. I had a week and managed to put down a demo of Waterbearer. So I just had his engineer and all these instruments that at last I could play, you know, like marimba, glockenspiel, all the tuned percussion, the synthesizers. So I had a really good demo of the song Waterbearer, which I played mostly myself. I don't think there was anybody else on the demo.
Right.
And it sounded quite similar to the eventual master, although I had some more professional musicians. It followed a year in 1970 ate from the new year right up until November, traipsing around. Yeah, they all said no. Anyway, at that time, the whole kind of magical, spiritual era of the 60s and 70s was really coming to an end. You know,
Yes.
I was kind of a bit late for the news with my ethereal Tolkien-esque demo of Waterbury. So I didn't get any interest really, except a polite, that's very nice, but we don't think it's going to be very commercial. And then it was a November day. I remember I had an appointment with Island Records. I was living down in Gloucestershire, and I remember I drove up to the appointment at Island Records, and I said to myself, right, if they say no, I'm going to give it up, give up music, get a proper job. This is too stressful.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. I've been around every single record label that I could think of. But I was sitting in the waiting room, and out came this record executive called Howard Thompson. I'll never forget him. And he had he was just like a punk rocker, you know, safety pins all over him. And I thought, he'll never like Waterbury, forget it. We put the cassette on, which was, you know, the demo was on cassette. And just said, oh, this is amazing. I couldn't believe it. So he said, yeah, I'd really like to sign you, but I'm about to move to Bronze Records. So I can either sign you to Ireland before I leave, or you can come with me to Bronze Records. Yeah. And I just said, oh, wherever you're going, I'll go with you.
Did you get to choose the personnel on that record?
Well, I was very much in control of it because they knew that I'd played everything on the demo. But I had a few really great musicians, like Frank Ricotti. He was a wonderful session musician at that time, played vibraphone, marimba, and all the lovely tune percussion. Herbie Flowers, he was wonderful, very eccentric, lovely guy. You know, I love what they all played. So and then a little bit later, sometime around August, September, Bronze Records said, well, we're releasing Waterbury now in September, but we need a single. They said, could you go and write a single, preferably a hit single? And again, I was in a very, very inspired mood. And so I got into my car and I drove down to actually living in Hereford at that time. It's a long drive. And I actually got to write that single on the M4. Just as I was approaching memory service stations, I got the hook of the song, which was Kiele Aloha, you know, that bit. And I pulled into memory service station and wrote down the lyrics. When I got back, I went into my demo studio, put a demo down. When I played it to the record company, they thought that it was great, it had hit potential. And so I called Herbie Flowers and said, can you come, you know, we're recording a single, Frank Ricotti. So they were the only two other musicians on Mirrors.
And it did become a hit, of course.
It was DLT's record of the week within a week of being released. I remember I was out in my garden and I got a phone call with the news. I couldn't believe it. Another long story is how I relocated to Germany. Bronze Records, they were not the right record label for me. They went bankrupt in the mid-80s, I think around about 85. But I was selling a lot of records in Germany, so I got this offer from Areola Records in Munich. It was a really good record deal offer. So I relocated to Germany, and I think it was the most enjoyable part of my career. Met a lot of wonderful people. I worked more with other musicians and producers during that period, and you know, when I look back on my life, I think it was the happiest time in terms of my career. I sometimes regret not having the space, the time, the mental kind of composure, if you like, that I had during that 5 years when I was experimenting and creating Waterbearer. And
Yes.
it was all mine. You know, it was my canvas, my colours. You know, I had the time, if you like, to do that.
Well, thank you so much, Sally.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Sally. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Good night in the UK.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Goodbye.